Close your eyes if you like, and let the world you know slip gently away. Imagine the hum of traffic, the glow of lamps, the ticking of clocks, all dissolving until there is only silence. Now drift backwards, not by days or years, not even by centuries, but by billions of years, so far back in time that the modern world is not even a thought, not even a possibility. The Earth you arrive at is both familiar and strange. There is sky, yes, but it is hazier, carrying a texture of gases not yet fully tamed by oxygen. The stars shine above, older than memory, but the constellations you know have not yet taken shape. There are oceans, endless oceans, but no forests standing tall upon the land, no deserts rolling with sand, no mountains with snow-capped peaks. The continents are still shy, small fragments of rock scattered here and there, bare and quiet. Peer closer at the seas. The oceans are the cradles of all life, but they are not yet the thriving, colorful reefs you might imagine. There are no fish darting through the water, no corals building palaces beneath the waves. Instead, the oceans are ruled by simplicity. For billions of years, the story of life has been one of smallness, tiny single-celled beings, prokaryotes drifting in currents, clinging to rocks, gathering in thin films where sunlight touches shallow waters. These little architects of survival have shaped the world already, breathing oxygen into the air, though they know nothing of the gift they are giving. Imagine, if you will, standing at the edge of one of these Proterozoic seas. The tide rolls in, then sighs back again and again, just as it does today. But as you look out, the world is alien. No gulls cry overhead, no crabs scuttle on the sand, no trees whisper in the wind. The air is sharper, unfamiliar, and the silence feels eternal. If you could scoop up a handful of water, you would see nothing with your naked eye. Yet within that handful are billions of tiny cells, unseen and unassuming, each one carrying the torch of life. For endless ages, this has been the rhythm. Tide after tide, star after star, microbes multiplying, drifting, enduring. Picture the patience of it. A billion years is an ocean of time, longer than human imagination can comfortably hold. Whole mountain ranges could rise and crumble back into dust within that span. Stars could be born and burn themselves into silence. And yet, life remained small, waiting quietly for its next great step. And then something happens, something small, almost invisible, something so subtle that the world above the water would not notice for millions of years. A single cell engulfs another. It is an ordinary act at first, the kind of thing that has happened countless times before. But this time, the ending is different. What should have been a meal becomes a partnership. Instead of being digested, the engulfed cell lives on inside the other. What should have been destruction becomes cooperation. In that quiet moment, a new kind of cell is born, more spacious, more complex, more full of possibility. This is the birth of the first eukaryotes. It is not a thunderclap. It is not a storm tearing across the sky. It is more like a candle lit in a vast cavern, a small flame glowing steadily in the dark. Yet this small flame will change everything. Inside these new cells, mitochondria hum with energy, like tiny hearths burning in the night. DNA is drawn into the safety of a nucleus, like a library built to protect the most precious of books. For the first time in Earth's story, life has room to grow into something more. Imagine leaning close to that ancient sea, knowing what is to come. Knowing that in time, these quiet cells will give rise to creatures that swim, that walk, that fly. Knowing that in time, forests will unfurl across continents, flowers will bloom, and voices will laugh beneath the stars. All of it begins here, with the first eukaryotes, in a moment so small it almost slips past unnoticed. As you listen, let the world outside fade a little more. Picture yourself in a quiet, safe place, with the hush of waves in the distance and the glow of firelight nearby. This is not a story of battles or empires. It is a story of patience, of partnership, of possibilities whispered into being by the smallest sparks of life. And tonight, we will take our time with it. We will linger in these ancient oceans, walking slowly through their mysteries, tracing the steps that led from simplicity to complexity. We will listen to the long silence of deep time and find comfort in the thought that even in the darkest stretches of history, life was quietly weaving a future. This is the story of the first eukaryotes, and like the waves of the ancient seas, it begins softly, endlessly, with a rhythm that will carry us into the heart of life's unfolding. So let us begin together. Before the first eukaryotes stirred in the oceans, Before the quiet partnerships that would change everything, the world belonged entirely to the simplest of beings. For billions of years, longer than the entire span of animals, plants, and humanity combined, the Earth was the realm of the prokaryotes. They were tiny, so small that even if you cupped your hands around the clearest pool of Proterozoic water and held it up to the light, you would see nothing at all. But within that handful of water, within every droplet, there were billions of them, floating, multiplying, whispering their existence across endless time. These prokaryotes were builders of the unseen. They had no nuclei, no compartments, no inner rooms in which to store their secrets. Their lives were lived openly, their DNA unshielded in the bustling chaos of their interiors. And yet, despite their simplicity, they endured. In fact, their endurance was the key to their dominance. Imagine the Earth as it was when they first spread across its oceans. The planet was younger then, its crust still reshaping itself with fire from within. Volcanoes bellowed across the seas, their ash drifting like smoke over the water. Meteorites still visited from time to time, carrying with them both destruction and possibility. The atmosphere was shifting, unstable, a mixture of gases that would have been poison to modern lungs. And yet, through it all, these little architects of life carried on. They built structures together, weaving themselves into vast microbial mats, layered communities of cells clinging to rocks in shallow seas. These mats rose and fell with the tide, creating intricate domes called stromatolites, which still exist in hidden corners of the Earth today, fossils of persistence and patience. To walk along a Proterozoic shoreline would be to see these low, lumpy mounds stretching out beneath the shallows, each one a city of microbes, each one alive with purpose. And what was their purpose? To live, to multiply, to endure. Slowly, they learned to harness sunlight. Some became cyanobacteria, tiny alchemists who captured the rays of the sun and turned them into energy, exhaling oxygen as waste. They could not have known it, but this quiet act would change the destiny of the planet. With every breath of oxygen they released, the atmosphere shifted. Bit by bit, molecule by molecule, they filled the skies with the air you and I now depend on. But to the prokaryotes themselves, life was not about destiny or change. It was about survival. They clustered in mats, sheltered in films of slime, or drifted freely with the currents. Some found comfort in the deep, dark places where no light penetrated, living on chemical energy drawn from rocks and vents. Others embraced the sunlit shallows, basking in the light of an ancient sky. Picture them, if you will, tiny, unseen drifters, their lives repeating endlessly. Divide, float, survive. Divide, float, survive. For 1 billion years and more, this was the rhythm of Earth. No forests to rustle, no rivers filled with fish, no wings or paws or leaves, only the slow, steady hum of microbial life, painting the world in invisible strokes. And yet even in this simplicity there was beauty. The seas shimmered with unseen abundance, their surfaces reflecting the stars above. The air grew richer, more hospitable, though no one yet breathed it as we do. Life's patience was immeasurable, its silence profound. There is a coziness to that thought, the idea that existence can be enough, that survival itself is an act of quiet wonder. This long age of simplicity was not wasted time. It was a foundation. These tiny, tireless prokaryotes were laying the bricks of possibility, stone by invisible stone. They were shaping the chemistry of the oceans, filling the skies with oxygen, preparing a stage far grander than they could ever imagine. And so, for billions of years, the Earth belonged to them. Each tide that rolled across the shore, each sunrise that spilled gold over the horizon, belonged to the world of microbes. To look upon that time is to feel the vastness of patience, the slow unfolding of possibility. We often imagine progress as quick, as sudden leaps forward, but life teaches us that sometimes the most profound changes are born in stillness. For eons, life remained simple, and in that simplicity, it gathered strength. It was as though the Earth itself was taking a long, deep breath, waiting for the moment when complexity would quietly step onto the stage. That moment was drawing near. Hidden in the oceans, somewhere in the countless gatherings of tiny cells, something was about to happen. Something so small it could not be seen, and yet so powerful it would alter the course of every living thing to come. But before we go there, linger a little longer with this thought. The world once belonged to the smallest of beings, And in a way, it still does. The age of simplicity had endured for so long that it seemed unshakable. For billions of years, the smallest of beings had ruled, drifting, multiplying, surviving in rhythms as steady as the tides. And yet, deep in the oceans, in waters stirred by currents and warmed by sunlight, something subtle began to unfold. It was not a thunderous change. No mountains split open, no skies blazed with fire. Instead, it began quietly, as most great revolutions do. It began within the intimacy of one cell and another. Picture a single, drifting microbe suspended in the quiet embrace of the ocean. Around it float countless others, tiny lives brushing against one another in the vast emptiness of the sea. Some cells are hunters, engulfing others to sustain themselves. Some are drifters, content to bask in sunlight and sip on the energy it provides. It is a world of invisible interactions, repeated endlessly for millions of years. But one encounter does not follow the old script. One cell engulfs another, an act of hunger, an act as old as life itself. Yet something happens. The cell inside does not die. It resists digestion, lingers, and settles into its new home. What should have been an ending becomes a beginning. The two cells, instead of fighting, begin to coexist. The host provides protection, shelter, and stability. The guest provides energy, efficiency, a spark of power that the host alone could never achieve. This is endosymbiosis, the partnership within. It is not a word that could ever have been spoken then, but it is a story that unfolded nonetheless. It was as though two lives, instead of standing apart, decided to link arms and walk together. One cell became two, two became one, and in that union was the seed of something extraordinary. Imagine the coziness of this moment. Within the vast loneliness of the ocean, two tiny beings found companionship. The engulfed cell, once a free-living microbe, transformed into the mitochondrion, a furnace of energy within its host. Suddenly, the host could breathe deeper, harnessing oxygen in ways no prokaryote could. Suddenly, the rhythms of survival shifted. It was not a sudden explosion. This change was fragile, delicate, and rare. Most cells continued as they always had, dividing, floating, drifting in endless simplicity. But in hidden pockets of the sea, this new kind of partnership began to spread. Slowly, quietly, it reshaped what was possible. The oceans did not notice. The stars did not notice. The tides rolled on as they always had, but life itself was quietly rewriting its story. The age of simplicity was not ending, it was evolving. The prokaryotes that had carried the torch of life for billions of years had, through an invisible act of union, given rise to the next chapter, the age of the eukaryotes. Think of it like a whisper that becomes a chorus. One cell formed a partnership, then another, then another. Over time, these partnerships grew stronger, more stable, more powerful. Each tiny act of union echoed forward through deep time until it became the foundation of forests, reefs, creatures, and eventually us. There is comfort in this thought, that the greatest transformations do not always arrive in thunder and lightning. Sometimes they arrive in silence, in the smallest moments, in the choice to live together rather than apart. The invisible revolution of the first eukaryotes was exactly that, a quiet reshaping of life's possibilities, so gentle that the world above carried on unchanged, yet so profound that nothing would ever be the same again. And so, in the hidden waters of the Proterozoic, life's story took a new turn. The tide of simplicity began to ripple with complexity, not with haste, but with patience. For what is time to life, it has oceans of it to spend. This is where the world began to prepare for the flourishing of every leaf, every wing, every voice to come. In this quiet union, the seeds of future worlds were sown. The quiet revolution of endosymbiosis had begun, and with it, the first sparks of something truly extraordinary. Deep in the oceans, unseen by any eye, the future of all complex life rested inside the tiniest of partnerships. Imagine once more that drifting cell, a simple creature no larger than a speck of dust, carrying within it a guest. That guest was once a free-living microbe, with its own will, its own rhythms of survival, but now it found itself inside the body of another, and instead of perishing, it discovered a new role. This little guest cell became what we now call the mitochondrion, the powerhouse of the cell, though to think of it only as machinery is to miss its quiet poetry. The mitochondrion was like a glowing ember nestled within its host, a tiny furnace that burned oxygen and gave back energy in return. Energy is life. To exist, to grow, to divide, to endure, all of it requires power. Prokaryotes, for all their resilience, worked with a kind of limited flame, a modest spark that allowed survival but kept complexity small. But with mitochondria, the spark grew into a steady fire. The host cell could breathe oxygen more deeply, draw more power from its food, and use that energy to dream bigger, to stretch toward greater possibilities. Picture it, a cell that had once drifted in quiet simplicity, now glowing within, carrying tiny engines of energy. Each heartbeat of the mitochondria fueled not only survival, but the promise of growth. It was as though a single-room hut had suddenly been given a fireplace, its warmth filling every corner, its glow opening the door to new kinds of life. Of course, none of this was quick. Millions of years passed as these new partnerships stabilized, strengthened, and spread. Most cells remained what they had always been, simple prokaryotes, still thriving in their timeless ways. But the eukaryotes, carrying their mitochondria like lanterns in the deep, began to carve out new possibilities. What is most remarkable, perhaps, is the spirit of cooperation at the heart of it. The mitochondrion was not conquered, nor was it enslaved. It was a guest who became family. Over time, its independence faded, its genes merging with its host, until it was no longer an outsider, but an inseparable part of the whole. Together, they were more than they had ever been apart. There is a coziness in that thought, that life's greatest leap forward came not from conquest, but from companionship, from two lives deciding in their quiet way to walk together instead of apart. The mitochondria within us, within every leaf, within every bird and fish and human, are living echoes of that ancient friendship. Think of your own breath as you listen. Every inhale fills your body with oxygen. Every exhale carries it away. And within you, billions upon billions of mitochondria use that oxygen to keep you alive, to let your heart beat, your thoughts wander, your voice rise and fall. Every breath you take is a continuation of that first ancient union. In the Proterozoic seas, no one knew. The tides rolled on, the stars wheeled overhead, and the world appeared as it always had, quiet, simple, unchanging. But hidden within those waters, in partnerships too small to see, the future had shifted. The world had been given a gift, a deeper fire, a stronger breath, an inner furnace that would one day light the path for forests, animals, and human beings. The mitochondrion was not just a part of the cell. It was a symbol of what life could become when it embraced cooperation, when it opened itself to something new. And in that opening, the possibilities of Earth expanded in silence, preparing for the long and patient story yet to unfold. The mitochondrion had given life a new fire, a stronger pulse of energy. But energy alone is not enough. To shape the future, to allow the story of life to stretch beyond simplicity, another quiet transformation was needed. And so, deep in the oceans of the Proterozoic, another innovation appeared, just as subtle, just as profound. It began with something fragile, DNA, the blueprint of life, the long, delicate strands that held the instructions for survival, replication, and growth. In the early prokaryotes, DNA drifted freely within the cell, unshielded, exposed to the bustle of chemical reactions around it. This arrangement worked for billions of years, but it left life vulnerable, its precious blueprint too easily tangled, damaged, or disrupted. Now imagine the turning of an unseen key. Within the first eukaryotes, something new formed, a nucleus. It was a chamber, a sanctuary, a room built within the cell's tiny house. Inside this chamber, DNA could rest safely, guarded from the chaos beyond. The nucleus was like a library with walls of stone, protecting scrolls too precious to lose. With this simple act of sheltering, a world of possibilities opened. DNA, protected and organized, could grow more complex. It could split its duties, experiment with new instructions, allow mistakes to linger long enough to become innovations. Life could now explore, adapt, and create with a freedom it had never known. Picture it as if you are standing in a cottage on a stormy night. Outside, the wind howls, rain lashes at the windows, and the world feels uncertain. But within the walls, the fire crackles, the shelves are lined with books, and the stories are safe. That is what the nucleus became for the cell, a quiet refuge, a place where the story of life could be written and rewritten without fear of being blown away. It was not immediate, nor was it universal. Many cells carried on without nuclei, just as they always had, thriving in simplicity. But in those eukaryotic cells where the nucleus had appeared, the future was forever changed. Within those small chambers, the potential for multicellular life, for tissues, organs, and bodies, began to take root. The nucleus was more than protection, it was ordered. Prokaryotes lived like bustling marketplaces, their DNA open to the streets, their functions jumbled together. Eukaryotes, with their nuclei, lived like towns with libraries, with archives carefully tended. Order made complexity possible, and complexity made innovation inevitable. Think of what it means for you, here and now. Inside every one of your trillions of cells is a nucleus, guarding your DNA, keeping safe the code that has been carried forward from those ancient seas. Each time your body grows, heals, or simply lives, it is because the nucleus holds the blueprint steady, unrolling instructions from a scroll billions of years old. There is coziness in knowing that the story of life is written in such careful hands, that within you are libraries, billions of them, each one humming softly with the memory of that first ancient chamber in the seas of the Proterozoic. And so, in that hidden moment of innovation, life gained not only fire from the mitochondria, but also shelter from the nucleus. Together, these transformations made cells not just survivors, but dreamers, tiny dreamers in the ocean, preparing a stage upon which all of Earth's future wonders would someday unfold. The nucleus did not shout its arrival. Like all of life's greatest changes, it came quietly, invisibly, and yet it altered everything. Within its walls, the story of complexity began to take shape, waiting patiently for the next chapter to be written. The oceans of the Proterozoic had already witnessed quiet miracles, mitochondria glowing like hidden hearths inside cells, nuclei rising like libraries to guard the fragile scrolls of DNA. With these gifts, life was ready to experiment, to drift into new forms, to populate the seas with a subtle but growing diversity. And so the oceans became home to a new cast of characters, tiny eukaryotic cells that we now call protozoa. To the naked eye, the seas still looked empty, wide and endless, their surfaces broken only by wind and waves. But in every drop of water, a hidden theater had begun to play. Imagine peering through a window of time, looking into a single droplet of ancient seawater magnified 1,000-fold. What at first appeared clear and plain now glimmers with movement. Small, intricate creatures drift through the liquid, each no larger than a speck, yet alive with astonishing complexity. Some extend delicate, waving arms, pseudopodia, reaching out to grasp food or to pull themselves forward. Others flick tiny hairs, cilia, beating in unison like oars of a boat, propelling their bodies through the water with surprising grace. Still others lash whip-like tails, flagella, moving with slow, deliberate strokes. These protozoa are pioneers of possibility. Unlike the simple prokaryotes that came before, they are busy with internal life. Their mitochondria churn with energy, their nuclei hum with information, and their cytoplasm is alive with bustling activity, each organelle performing its role in the harmony of the cell. They are no longer mere survivors, they are explorers. Some hunt, engulfing smaller cells as prey, others graze on algae, sipping the sunlight stored within. Still others drift freely, letting the currents carry them into new spaces. Within their world, tiny dramas unfold, predator and prey, competition and coexistence, hunger and satisfaction. And yet, all of it is too small for any eye of the time to see. Picture them as lanterns glowing in the dark waters. Each protozoan is a light of complexity, flickering gently, signaling that life has stepped into a new chapter. The oceans, once uniform with simplicity, now pulse with invisible variety, each drop of water carrying the seeds of future forests and creatures. Pause for a moment and think of the coziness of this thought, that in every cup of seawater, in every tide pool and shallow lagoon, entire hidden worlds exist. They always have and they always will. Even today, if you were to scoop up a drop from a pond and place it beneath a microscope, you would see echoes of this ancient time, protozoa gliding gracefully, tiny yet complete, their lives lived with quiet purpose. In the Proterozoic seas, their presence was revolutionary. These protozoa tested the boundaries of what it meant to be alive. Some specialized in movement, some in feeding, some in photosynthesis. Each one was an experiment in nature's laboratory, a trial that might lead nowhere or might lead to wonders beyond imagining. The oceans themselves became a vast stage, their currents carrying protozoa to new waters, their sunlight feeding photosynthetic varieties that glowed faintly green with chloroplasts. Life was beginning to diversify, to spread into niches, to form webs of interaction richer than the microbial mats of the past. And yet there was no rush. Time stretched endlessly, patient and forgiving. 1,000,000 years was but a breath, 1,000,000,000 years a gentle sigh. In that endless expanse, protozoa drifted, lived, died, and multiplied again, their stories woven into the fabric of deep time. Think of them as the first dancers on an empty floor. The music had only just begun, faint and tentative, but the dance itself promised to last forever. Each protozoan, with its nucleus, its mitochondria, and its hidden complexity, was a step toward multicellular life, toward coral reefs and forests, toward animals and humanity. The ocean of protozoa was not loud, not dramatic, but it was alive with potential. To linger here is to feel the wonder of beginnings, the quiet stirring of possibility that one day would grow into all the beauty and richness of the living world. And so, beneath the calm waves of the Proterozoic, the first protozoa swam. Lanterns in the dark, whispers of the future, tiny cells carrying within them the promise of everything to come. The protozoa swam on, their tiny bodies flickering in the currents, their lantern lives shining unseen. But while they lived and multiplied, another force was always at work. A force larger than oceans, larger than mountains, larger than life itself. That force was time. Time has always been the patient artist of the earth. It does not rush, it does not hurry. It carves slowly, like a sculptor chipping away at stone, or like waves smoothing a pebble across countless tides. And in the Proterozoic Eon, time was the greatest sculptor of all, shaping not only landscapes, but the very nature of life itself. Imagine millions of years passing like gentle breaths. Imagine billions of years flowing like rivers, silent and unstoppable. For us, a century feels long. For the Earth, it is but a blink. In that expanse, protozoa and their eukaryotic kin drifted, lived and died by the trillions. Whole lineages rose and vanished without ever leaving a trace, and yet their experiments mattered. Each generation carried within it small variations, subtle changes, tiny adjustments that time patiently tested. Some cells thrived in sunlight, others retreated into the shadows. Some became skilled hunters, while others survived by absorbing the remnants of the dead. With every success and every failure, time refined them, slowly chiseling complexity out of simplicity. Picture the oceans themselves as a vast studio. Within every drop of water, time's hands were at work, molding, shaping, discarding, and beginning again. There were no mistakes, only trials. Life was clay, endlessly pliable, and time was the sculptor who never tired. And yet this process was not dramatic. There were no sudden bursts of change that filled the seas with new creatures overnight. Instead, there was patience, immense, unbroken patience. Evolution moved like the ticking of a clock too slow for us to hear. 1,000,000 years might pass, and the difference from one generation to the next would be imperceptible, but stack enough of those generations together and something new began to emerge. Think of a loom, its shuttle moving back and forth, weaving threads into cloth. Each pass seems small, insignificant, but in time, a tapestry takes shape, rich, vast, intricate. That was the work of time in the Proterozoic, weaving the threads of life into new patterns, experimenting with forms that might last, preparing the world for the leap into complexity. There is a comfort in this. Life does not hurry, it does not demand instant results. It leans into patience, trusting that time will shape it into what it needs to be. The cells of the Proterozoic did not know where they were headed, nor could they, yet they trusted the rhythm of existence, divide, live, pass on their essence. And time, even the sculptor, guided them forward. As you listen, think of the stars above you. They too are patient sculptures of time, born from clouds of gas, burning for billions of years, and eventually fading into silence. Think of mountains rising slowly from the Earth's crust, only to be worn down grain by grain. The story of life is written in that same rhythm, not in sudden leaps, but in steady chisels, gentle strokes, quiet refinements. And so, in the great workshop of the oceans, time carved steadily. Eukaryotes grew sturdier, their mitochondria humming, their nuclei guarding precious instructions. Protozoa drifted like dancers, their movements refined over generations. Slowly, complexity gathered weight, like clay taking the form of something more. The silent sculptor worked without pause, preparing for chapters yet to come, chapters of cooperation, of multicellularity, of creatures that would one day walk the land and gaze at the stars. But for now, the world remained quiet. The seas whispered with unseen life, and time carved on, endlessly patient, endlessly creative. The sculptor never rushed, and neither should we. In that slowness, in that patience, the future was being formed, and from the perspective of deep time, every second, every moment, every life, no matter how small, was part of a masterpiece still unfolding. Life had been given a fire through the mitochondria, a steady inner hearth that turned oxygen into energy. With this gift, eukaryotic cells thrived, glowing invisibly in the oceans of the Proterozoic. But the story of symbiosis was not finished yet. Another partnership, just as profound, was waiting to unfold. This time it was not about fire, but about light. Somewhere in the ancient seas, a eukaryotic cell encountered a cyanobacterium, a tiny architect of sunlight, a being that had already changed the planet by exhaling oxygen into the air. Normally, such an encounter might have ended in digestion, the cyanobacterium broken down and consumed. But just as it had with mitochondria, life chose a different path. The cyanobacterium stayed. Inside its host, the little suncatcher continued to do what it always had: gather sunlight, turn it into sugar, and release oxygen. But now, instead of drifting freely, its work directly fed the larger cell. The host offered safety, shelter, and resources. The guest offered food, nourishment, and abundance. Over time, this union grew inseparable. The cyanobacterium became the chloroplast, a green jewel within the cell, capturing the golden threads of sunlight and weaving them into life. With this second gift, the world transformed once again. Cells no longer relied solely on consuming others or feeding on chemical scraps. Now they could make their own food directly from the sun. Imagine the liberation of this, to be bathed in light and to draw from it the energy to grow. Entire lineages of photosynthetic eukaryotes blossomed, spreading across the seas like invisible meadows, shimmering green under the touch of sunlight. Pause here for a moment and picture the coziness of this scene. The oceans, quiet and calm, stretching to every horizon. Beneath the waves, tiny cells glow with sunlight, like lanterns drifting in slow motion. They form unseen forests, invisible gardens swaying gently with the currents. The earth, once barren of green, now carries the very first whisper of color. It was a gentle revolution. No thunderclaps announced it. No flames tore across the sky. It was simply sunlight caught and stored, again and again, for millions of years. And yet, this subtle act filled the seas with food, fed countless creatures, and laid the groundwork for ecosystems far richer than the microbial mats of old. Think of your own life, here and now. Every breath you take is tied to chloroplasts. Every apple, every leaf of lettuce, every tree, every blade of grass is a descendant of those first symbiotic unions. Even the forests that shade the world today, the flowers that bloom in gardens, the fields of grain that sustain civilizations, all of them trace back to this ancient act of partnership between a drifting cell and a sun-loving bacterium. There is something deeply comforting about that. Life's greatest innovations have not come through force, but through companionship. The mitochondrion and the chloroplast, one a furnace of energy, the other a garden of light, are reminders that cooperation can build futures brighter than conquest ever could. Over time, these dual gifts reshaped the world. Oxygen levels rose higher. Photosynthetic eukaryotes grew more abundant, painting the seas with invisible color. The earth itself became greener, richer, more vibrant, not on its continents, which still lay barren and rocky, but within its oceans, where sunlight and life wove together into a quiet abundance. Picture this world, the waves glistening under Proterozoic sun, the air clearer with every breath of oxygen, the seas blooming with unseen gardens. It was not yet the Earth you know, but it was moving closer, step by patient step. And in that hidden abundance, in those quiet partnerships of fire and light, the stage was being set. One day, these simple unions would lead to forests stretching to the horizon, coral reefs teeming with color, and animals breathing deeply beneath the sky. But in the beginning, it was just a whisper, a gift passed in silence from one cell to another. The mitochondrion gave the gift of fire. The chloroplast gave the gift of sunlight. Together, they made life not only possible, but abundant. And within those quiet cells, unseen and uncelebrated, the story of the Earth's future began to glow a little brighter. The Earth's oceans were glowing with possibility. Inside their drifting cells, mitochondria turned oxygen into fire, while chloroplasts caught sunlight and spun it into food. With these twin gifts, life had been given energy in abundance. But what of the world itself? What of the air, the seas, the breath that wrapped around the planet? This is the story of oxygen, a gas so ordinary to us now that we scarcely notice it, and yet so transformative that it reshaped the entire destiny of life. Long before eukaryotes, cyanobacteria had begun the slow work of exhaling oxygen into the atmosphere. For millions upon millions of years, this invisible waste built quietly, molecule by molecule, rising into the skies, seeping into the oceans. At first, it was not a blessing but a poison. The ancient prokaryotes, who had lived for billions of years without it, found themselves struggling. For many, oxygen was a corrosive presence, a threat to their way of life. And yet slowly, balance emerged. Some microbes retreated into shadows and depths where oxygen could not reach. Others adapted, finding ways to survive in its presence. And then the eukaryotes arrived. They did not simply tolerate oxygen, they embraced it. With mitochondria burning oxygen like tiny furnaces, these new cells flourished where others faltered. To them, oxygen was not poison, but breath. It was the very fuel that allowed their complexity to thrive. Picture this transformation. The oceans, once ruled entirely by anaerobic life, began to change. In the shallows where sunlight touched and oxygen gathered, eukaryotes found themselves at home. They spread quietly, filling niches, multiplying slowly but surely. With each breath of oxygen they drew in, with each flicker of energy from their mitochondria, they grew stronger, more capable, more enduring. Imagine standing on the rocky shore of the Proterozoic world. The waves crash gently at your feet. The air above is thinner than you would know today, but it carries something new, oxygen, faint but growing, a breath of the future. Beneath the surface, tiny eukaryotes drift, their mitochondria glowing with life, each cell like a lantern lit by this invisible gas. This was a time of transformation, but not a sudden one. The rise of oxygen was measured in ages, in eras so vast they dwarf our sense of time. 1,000,000 years here, 100 million years there, each one adding a little more breath to the world, a little more space for complexity to grow. The patience of the process was astonishing, and yet, in the silence of deep time, oxygen's song grew louder. Think of your own breath now, steady and calm. Inhale, exhale. Each time you draw into yourself the same element that once filled those ancient seas, the same breath that gave eukaryotes their strength. You are connected, across billions of years, to that quiet revolution. The coziness of this thought is profound, that something so invisible, so ordinary, became the bridge between simplicity and complexity, between the quiet seas of the Proterozoic and the vibrant forests and reefs of today. Without oxygen, the Earth would have remained a world of microbes, life trapped in the smallness of single cells. With oxygen, the door opened. And so eukaryotes flourished. They became masters of oxygen, using it to build, to move, to explore. They spread into the shallows, into the currents, into new realms of possibility. For the first time in Earth's history, life did not merely endure, it expanded, it diversified, it breathed deeply. The breath of oxygen was not just a chemical change. It was a symphony that filled the world, note by note, until life itself could sing in harmony with it. Each mitochondrion within each cell played its part, turning oxygen into energy, energy into survival, survival into the slow unfolding of the future. Above them, the skies grew clearer, the air more alive. Beneath them, the seas stirred with abundance, fed by sunlight, powered by breath. The earth was changing, and though it looked quiet on the surface, within every drop of water, revolutions were unfolding. It is humbling to think that your own body carries this legacy, that your lungs, filling and emptying, echo a rhythm begun billions of years ago in those ancient seas, that every breath you take is not only yours, but also theirs, the breath of eukaryotes, the gift of oxygen, the whisper of the Proterozoic carried forward into the present. And in that gift, the world was prepared for what would come next, the building of communities, the gathering of cells, the first steps toward true multicellularity. But before that leap, life needed to settle into its newfound abundance, to let oxygen and sunlight weave their gentle patterns across the seas. For now, the world was breathing slowly, deeply, for the very first time. The oceans of the Proterozoic were filled with eukaryotic cells, tiny beings adrift in vast waters, their mitochondria burning oxygen, their chloroplasts weaving sunlight into food. To the naked eye, the seas still looked calm, empty, endless. But if you could shrink yourself down, small enough to slip into a single droplet of water, you would discover an entire universe. A eukaryotic cell was not just a dot of life, it was a world within a world. Imagine drifting inside one. You enter through its soft outer membrane, a boundary like the wall of a cottage, flexible yet protective, separating the bustling life within from the wilderness without. Inside, the space hums with activity. Every corner is alive with purpose. There are the mitochondria, glowing like tiny hearths, their fires burning oxygen to keep the home warm. They work tirelessly, countless furnaces producing energy in steady rhythm. Each one is a reminder of an ancient partnership, still alive, still faithful, generation after generation. Nearby stands the nucleus, the great library of the cell. Its walls are sturdy, its doors carefully guarded. Within it lie shelves of scrolls, DNA, the blueprints of life itself. The nucleus is quiet, steady, protective, making sure the story of existence is preserved and read with care. All around it, the cytoplasm stirs like a cozy village square. Tiny organelles bustle back and forth, each carrying out its duty. The endoplasmic reticulum stretches like long winding roads, folding proteins into their proper shapes. The Golgi apparatus acts like a post office, packaging and sending those proteins to where they are needed. Small vesicles scurry about like messengers, delivering supplies, clearing waste, keeping the household in order. There are guardians too. Lysosomes, filled with enzymes, break down what is no longer useful, recycling it into new material. They are the caretakers of balance, ensuring nothing goes to waste. And if this particular cell carries chloroplasts, then its windows glow green, capturing rays of sunlight streaming through the water above. These chloroplasts are like gardens within the house, harvesting light, feeding the home with sugar and oxygen. Every part has its role, every organelle works in harmony. Together, they form a tiny society, a city of life enclosed within the walls of a single cell. Pause for a moment and let the coziness of this thought settle in, that within you, within every living creature, there are universes of order and harmony at work, worlds within worlds, endlessly alive. 1 trillion bustling cities exist inside your body at this very moment, and you are their landscape, their ocean, their world. Now return to the ancient seas. Each drop of water carried countless such worlds, each cell a universe of fire, libraries, gardens, and caretakers. They were small, invisible, and yet together they transformed the oceans into a cosmos of complexity. It is easy to think of the Earth's history as vast and empty until animals appeared, until forests rose, until color and sound filled the world. But even in the Proterozoic, the richness was already there, hidden, microscopic, unseen. Each eukaryotic cell was a miracle of architecture, more intricate than the grandest cities humanity would one day build. And they drifted in their billions, carried by the tides, whispering a story that only time itself could hear. There is a gentle lesson in this, that complexity often begins in silence, hidden from view, growing patiently until the right moment arrives. The Proterozoic seas were not empty. They were galaxies of cells, each one alive with possibility, each one a world carrying within it the seeds of forests, coral reefs, and all the wonders yet to come. And so, within a single drop of water, entire universes thrived. A world within a world, carried forward by patience, by cooperation, by the silent sculptor of time. The oceans had been filled with single cells for billions of years. For so long, life was individual, each microbe surviving alone, drifting alone, enduring alone. But with the rise of eukaryotes, something began to change. For the first time, life reached beyond itself and began to weave connections, delicate, invisible, and profound. It started in the shallows, where sunlight poured into the water and oxygen lingered in gentle abundance. Here, photosynthetic eukaryotes drifted in their billions, each one turning golden light into food, filling the seas with sugar and energy. They were like invisible fields of grass, meadows swaying softly in the currents, unseen but vital. Where there were fields, there were grazers. Other eukaryotes swam among them, feeding on their abundance. These hunters did not destroy the meadows but pruned them, keeping them in balance, their hunger shaping the dance of life. And so, a cycle began, producers and consumers, sunlight and appetite, growth and restraint. In every tide pool, in every drop of water, tiny communities formed. One species produced, another consumed, another scavenged the remains. Together, they formed networks of energy, webs of survival. They were the first ecosystems of complexity, born not from chance, but from the gentle weaving of connection. Imagine standing at the edge of a Proterozoic lagoon. The water looks calm, glassy in the morning sun, but if you could see with ancient eyes, tuned to the scale of the invisible, you would witness a bustling marketplace beneath the surface. Algae bloom in radiant green patches, single cells glowing faintly with sunlight. Small protozoa drift between them, nibbling, chasing, darting away. Bacteria swarm in clouds around the waste they leave behind, recycling it into nourishment for others. And in the quiet spaces between, detritus settles, feeding scavengers who thrive on what is left. It was simple compared to the forests and coral reefs of the future, yet it was a beginning. For the first time, life did not exist only as isolated individuals, but as communities, interdependent, balanced, shaped by the presence of one another. There is a coziness in this realization that even at the smallest scale, life seeks connection. The story of ecosystems, the forests you walk through, the gardens that bloom in spring, the oceans alive with whales and fish, all of it began here, in these invisible gatherings of cells. The same patterns of cooperation and competition that define modern ecosystems were born in these ancient waters. Over millions of years, these interactions grew more intricate. Some eukaryotes specialized as hunters, hunting the art of pursuit. Others specialized as grazers, drifting in vast blooms, content to sip on sunlight and multiply. Still others found safety in numbers, clustering together in small colonies, their collective strength offering protection against the solitary hunters. The oceans were still silent, still alien, but beneath the calm waves, balance was being born. Life was no longer only about survival, it was about relationships. And those relationships, repeated across millions of years, built the foundation of every ecosystem to come. Think of a forest today, the trees reaching for sunlight, the deer grazing in the meadows, the wolves moving silently through the shadows, the fungi recycling the fallen leaves. Now imagine that forest stripped of every visible creature, reduced to a scale invisible to the eye, and you have the Proterozoic seas. The pattern was the same, only smaller, only simpler. It was the first draft of the great ecological symphony. And as these first ecosystems stabilized, the world itself began to change. Oxygen spread further, nutrients cycled more efficiently, sunlight was captured more effectively. The earth was learning to breathe through its life, each cell a note in a growing harmony. There is comfort in this thought, that connection has always been at the heart of life, that even in its earliest days, existence was not solitary but communal. The first ecosystems of complexity were gentle rehearsals for the grandeur to come, and within their quiet balance, the seeds of forests, coral reefs, and living worlds were planted. The oceans of the Proterozoic had become tapestries of connection. Producers and grazers, hunters and scavengers, recyclers and symbionts, all weaving invisible patterns beneath the surface of the sea. Life was no longer a scattering of individuals, but a web of relationships. And within this new balance, a quiet possibility began to take shape. The possibility of cells not just living beside one another, but of living together. It began simply. Some eukaryotic cells, instead of separating cleanly after division, clung to each other. At first, this was accidental, cells bound by sticky proteins, small clusters drifting through the water like tiny families. But over time, those clusters offered advantages. Together, they were harder to consume. Together, they moved with more stability in the shifting currents. Together, they could share resources more efficiently. Picture these early gatherings of cells. A dozen or so clumped into a sphere, their bodies pressed close, each one a complete world within itself, yet bound to others. They swayed in the ocean like little floating villages, their collective shape giving them strength. Some specialized slightly, those on the outer edges absorbing sunlight, those in the center sheltered by their companions. It was not yet true specialization, not yet the rich differentiation of tissues and organs, but it was a beginning. This was the seed of multicellularity. Imagine, if you will, a quiet tide pool at dusk. The air is still, the water reflects the fading light of the sky. Beneath its calm surface, invisible clusters drift, tiny experiments in togetherness. They do not know that they are rewriting the script of life. They simply endure, and in their endurance, they create something new. Cooperation not just between different species, as in symbiosis, but between siblings, between kin, between cells born of the same lineage. The coziness of this thought is profound. That even the first steps toward multicellularity were not grand leaps, but gentle gestures of closeness, cells deciding, in their quiet way, to hold on to one another rather than drift apart. Over millions of years, these clusters became more common. Some fell apart, their bonds too weak, their experiments unfinished, but others held, generation after generation, until clumps of cells became colonies, and colonies began to experiment with roles. Some cells grew larger, others smaller. Some became better at movement, others at gathering food. Slowly, imperceptibly, the seeds of specialization were sown. Life had discovered that unity could be a form of strength. Think of a candle flame. Alone, it is fragile, easily blown out, but place many flames together and they form a steady glow that can warm a room. So too with cells. Alone, they were powerful but limited. Together, they became something more, something that whispered of futures unimaginable, the possibility of creatures larger than the eye could see, creatures built of many cells working as one. We know now where this led, to sponges, to corals, to fish, to birds, to trees, to humankind. But in the Proterozoic, it was simply an experiment, a seed planted in the silence of the sea. Most of those early attempts did not last, but some did. And those that did carried within them the blueprint of every multicellular organism that would ever walk, swim, or fly. It is humbling to think that our own bodies, built of trillions of cells, owe their existence to those first small gatherings. That within us, the spirit of cooperation that bound those cells together is still alive. That every heartbeat, every thought, every movement of your body is possible because long ago, in an ocean at dusk, a cluster of cells decided to cling to one another. The seeds of multicellularity were not loud, not dramatic, but they were steady, and in their steadiness, they carried the promise of everything to come. The Proterozoic oceans were vast and silent. No whales breached their waters, no schools of fish darted through their shallows, no shells clinked against the tide. To our eyes, they would seem empty, quiet, and uneventful. Yet beneath their stillness, in the hidden world of the microscopic, quiet triumphs were unfolding, victories so small that no living creature of the time could perceive them, but so profound that they would shape the entire story of Earth. These triumphs were not loud or dramatic. They were quiet whispers of change, written in the language of patience. A cell that chose to harbor a mitochondrion instead of consuming it. Another that sheltered a chloroplast and turned sunlight into nourishment. A cluster of eukaryotes that clung together after division, refusing to let go. Each of these was a tiny triumph, a step toward something new. Picture the ocean floor in those days, dimly lit, a world of soft sediment and drifting shadows. Their microbial mats still flourished as they had for billions of years, layers of cyanobacteria stacked like ancient carpets. But woven among them now were the quiet pioneers of complexity, eukaryotic cells glowing with mitochondria, drifting like unseen lanterns. To the naked eye, there was no difference. The mats looked the same. The oceans shimmered as they always had. But deep within, the very nature of life had changed. Consider how subtle these victories were. A prokaryote could survive and reproduce in hours. Its world was fast, efficient, relentless. Eukaryotes, with their larger size and greater complexity, were slower, more delicate. At first glance, they might have seemed less fit, less suited to survival in a harsh world. And yet, in the long game of deep time, they carried an advantage: energy, order, cooperation. Quiet strengths that did not shout but whispered across the millennia. Imagine millions of years flowing by like soft waves. Entire lineages rose and vanished, unseen except for the traces they left behind in the stone. Most experiments failed. Countless cells tried and faltered, but some succeeded, and each success was carried forward, written into the DNA, passed down to new generations, until it became part of the very fabric of life. There is a coziness in this thought, that the greatest victories of life are often the quiet ones, not battles won in fire or conquest, but small acts of endurance, of patience, of trying again and again until the path forward is found. The Proterozoic seas were full of such acts, microscopic triumphs, invisible to the eye but eternal in their consequence. Think of your own body now, built of trillions of cells. Every heartbeat, every breath, every thought is a triumph carried forward from those days. Your mitochondria, humming in each cell, are the descendants of those first partnerships. Your DNA, kept safe in its nucleus, is the legacy of that first shelter. The oxygen you breathe is the gift of ancient microbes that exhaled without knowing they were preparing a world for others. In the depths of the Proterozoic, life was not grand. It was not colorful, not yet diverse in shape and form, but it was triumphant in its smallness. Quiet victories accumulated like grains of sand until whole beaches of possibility stretched across the future. And so, in those silent oceans, life learned patience. It learned cooperation. It learned endurance. It learned that the smallest steps, taken faithfully, could lead to futures unimaginably vast. The world above might have seemed barren. The continents were rocky, empty, lifeless. The skies were thin, the winds unbroken by wings or leaves. But beneath the surface, in the depths where no eye could see, triumphs were blooming, quiet, steady, enduring triumphs that would one day give rise to forests, animals, and people who would look back and tell their story. The Proterozoic seas remind us that greatness does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it comes softly, in whispers, in patience, in the quiet triumphs of the depths. Billions of years have passed since those first quiet triumphs in the Proterozoic seas. The oceans of that time are long gone, their waters transformed, their landscapes reshaped by tectonic drift, ice, and fire. The cells that drifted invisibly through those ancient currents have multiplied, adapted, and diversified beyond recognition. And yet, their story is still with us, woven into every living thing on Earth. Pause for a moment and look around you. If you are near a window, perhaps you see trees swaying, their leaves shimmering in the light. If you are indoors, perhaps there is a plant on a shelf, a house cat curled in the sun, or even your own reflection in the glass. All of these are echoes of that ancient story. The trees outside breathe because their cells contain chloroplasts, the green gardens that once were free-living cyanobacteria. Those chloroplasts, descendants of a partnership struck 2 billion years ago, still capture sunlight, still weave food from light and air. Each leaf, each blade of grass, is a living reminder of that silent union beneath Proterozoic waves. The cat's muscles contract because mitochondria fuel them. Inside its every cell, as inside yours, tiny furnaces burn oxygen to release energy. Those mitochondria are the great-grandchildren of once independent bacteria that chose partnership over isolation. Their gift keeps hearts beating, lungs rising, eyes blinking in the morning light. And within your own body, trillions of nuclei guard your DNA, the scrolls that have been copied and passed down since the dawn of life. The nucleus is not just a structure, it is a continuity, a thread of memory that stretches back across billions of years to those first eukaryotes who sheltered their instructions behind protective walls. To live today is to carry all of this within you, You are not separate from the story of the Proterozoic, you are its latest chapter. Your cells, your breath, your heartbeat are living connections to those ancient oceans. Think of the coziness of this realization. As you sip a cup of tea, as you take a deep breath, as you stretch and settle into comfort, you are echoing processes that began long before there were trees, long before there were animals, long before the continents had even gathered into familiar shapes. You are a continuation of life's quiet patience, of its small victories, of its experiments in cooperation. It is easy in the rush of the modern world to feel separated from deep time. The hum of machines, the glow of screens, the rhythm of human schedules can make the ancient past seem distant, unreachable. But look closer and you find it everywhere, in the greenness of a leaf, in the breath of oxygen filling your lungs, in the steady thrum of mitochondria in every cell of your body. The Proterozoic is not gone, it lives on in you. There is comfort in remembering that the world has always been patient. Life did not hurry to reach this moment. It took billions of years of small steps, countless generations of unseen triumphs to arrive here. You are the result of that patience, the fruit of that slow and steady unfolding. And perhaps in this reflection, there is a lesson that greatness does not need to be rushed, that the most enduring transformations come quietly, through cooperation, through persistence, through the willingness to keep going even when change is invisible. When you walk in a forest, when you listen to birdsong, when you feel the warmth of sunlight on your skin, you are touching the outcome of choices made by cells that clung together, that shared energy, that sheltered DNA, that breathed oxygen. Their story is your story. The Proterozoic may feel far away, lost in the deep past, but it is not lost. It is here, in every breath, in every leaf, in every heartbeat. The reflections of that ancient age shimmer in the present moment, as close as your own skin, as intimate as your own life. And so we come to the quiet ending of this story, though in truth, it is not an ending at all. The tale of the first eukaryotes does not close with the Proterozoic seas, nor with the rise of multicellular life, nor even with the present moment as you sit here listening. It is a story still being written, carried in the cells of every living thing, whispered through every breath of oxygen, reflected in every beam of sunlight caught by a leaf. Think back now to the beginning of our journey, to the vast oceans that stretched beneath alien skies, to the microbial mats, patient and enduring, painting the world in oxygen, to the first union of cells, an engulfed microbe that became a furnace of energy, a partner rather than a meal, to the nucleus, rising like a library of life's most precious scrolls, to chloroplasts, the tiny gardens of light, to protozoa drifting like lanterns in the depths, to the seeds of multicellularity, clusters of cells clinging together in quiet companionship. Each step was small, each moment seemed like almost nothing at all, and yet, when stacked across billions of years, those whispers became symphonies, those sparks became fires, those seeds became forests. There is something humbling about that. Something comforting too, that life does not need to rush, that the greatest transformations come in stillness, in patience, in the willingness to keep trying, keep enduring, keep reaching for possibility even when no one is watching. The first eukaryotes never knew what they were beginning. They did not know that they carried the future of animals, of trees, of flowers, of human beings. They did not know they were setting the stage for coral reefs, for birds in flight, for music, for stories told by firelight. They simply lived, quietly cell by cell, moment by moment, and in their quietness, they changed everything. Now think of yourself again. Every breath you take, every beat of your heart, every movement of your body is possible because of choices made billions of years ago by unseen ancestors. Inside you, mitochondria still burn oxygen, just as they did in the Proterozoic seas. In every green leaf outside your window, chloroplasts still catch sunlight, just as they did when the continents were bare. In every nucleus of every cell in your body, DNA rests safely, the memory of life carried forward unbroken from that ancient time. You are not separate from the Proterozoic, you are its continuation, its whisper lives in you. And perhaps, in moments of stillness, when the world feels overwhelming or too fast, you can remember the lesson of those ancient seas. That time is a sculptor, that patience builds wonders, that the smallest acts of cooperation can echo for eternity. Close your eyes if you wish and imagine the deep ocean of 2 billion years ago. Imagine the lantern glow of protozoa drifting in the currents. Imagine the first cells clinging together, tiny sparks of unity. Imagine the world holding its breath, waiting for what would come. That whisper of possibility has never gone silent. It hums in your cells, it breathes in your lungs, it shimmers in the green of the living earth. This is the story of the first eukaryotes, a story of patience, of partnership, of quiet revolutions. A story that began in silence and continues still, in you, in me, in every living being that calls this world home. The Proterozoic is far away, yes, but listen closely and you can still hear it, a whisper from the deep past carried forward into every heartbeat of the present. And with that whisper, we rest our story. For billions of years, life had endured through persistence, through survival, through the simple rhythm of dividing and multiplying. But as eukaryotes rose in the Proterozoic seas, another theme began to echo through the story of existence: cooperation. It was there in the very beginning of their lineage, when one cell welcomed another inside, when mitochondria became hearths of fire instead of prey. It echoed again when chloroplasts took root, tiny gardens of light within their hosts. These partnerships, once fragile and rare, proved stronger than separation. Alone, each cell had limits. Together, they were boundless. And now that same spirit of cooperation reverberated in new ways. Cells that clung together after dividing found safety in numbers. Colonies formed, small clusters bound not by force, but by shared advantage. In those quiet gatherings, the pattern repeated: together was better than apart. Picture these small colonies drifting like tiny floating constellations in the ocean. Each cell, a world within itself, now joined to others in a greater whole. They shared protection, strength, and sometimes even the beginnings of division of labor. One cell lingered on the outside, shading the inner ones from harm. Another soaked in more light, feeding the group with energy. Though they did not know it, these were the first echoes of tissues, organs, and bodies. Cooperation was not limited to cells within a colony. Across the seas, life was experimenting with partnerships. Bacteria clung to eukaryotes, scavenging waste while offering vitamins in return. Some cells formed mutual defenses, chemical signals passing between them like whispers in the water. The seas became a network of alliances, fragile but growing. There is a coziness in this realization that even at life's smallest scale, companionship and sharing shaped the path forward. The Earth did not march toward complexity through conquest alone, but through harmony, through the willingness of one being to live with another. If you pause to reflect, you see this echo everywhere around you today. In the soil beneath your feet, fungi and plants trade sugars and minerals. In your own body, trillions of microbes live in your gut, helping you digest, shaping your health, whispering their influence into your daily life. In every forest, every reef, every field, cooperation binds together communities of life, just as it did in the Proterozoic. The echo has never faded. It began in the silence of the seas, when cells chose unity over solitude, and it has continued ever since, resounding through every chapter of life's story. Cooperation is not always perfect. It carries tensions, struggles, and failures. Many partnerships dissolved, many experiments faltered, yet the echo endured because in the long patience of time, cooperation offered something that conquest could not: resilience. When life shared its gifts, it thrived. And so, the Proterozoic oceans became not only laboratories of evolution, but classrooms of companionship. In their depths, life whispered its greatest lesson, that togetherness builds strength and sharing builds futures. The echo still lingers. It hums in the mitochondria of your cells. It glows in the green of chloroplasts in every tree and leaf. It shines in the relationships that weave ecosystems together, from the smallest moss to the largest whale. It is the echo of cooperation, an ancient song, still playing, still gidding, still reminding us that even in the smallest partnerships, worlds can be changed forever. With mitochondria burning oxygen, with chloroplasts catching sunlight, and with cooperation echoing through the seas, life began to bloom in new and wondrous ways. The Proterozoic oceans, once empty but for drifting mats of microbes, now stirred with abundance. Across the shallow waters, sunlight poured down, and eukaryotic algae, those tiny green light-capturing cells, spread in waves. Though invisible to the eye of the time, these blooms were the first hidden forests of the Earth. Picture it: the sea floor lit from above, the shallows glowing with invisible green meadows. Each algal cell, no larger than a speck, drifted like a leaf upon the current. Yet in their trillions, they formed carpets, canopies, entire forests unseen. They breathed out oxygen, filling the water with bubbles, each one rising to kiss the surface and slip into the air above. They fed the grazers drifting among them, protozoa nibbling on the bounty. They anchored the first ecosystems with the steady, patient gift of food. If you stood on the rocky shores of the Proterozoic world, you would not have seen this richness. To your eyes, the waters would appear glassy and clear, perhaps tinted slightly green in places, nothing more. But if you had a microscope, if you could shrink yourself down, the view would take your breath away. You would see vast expanses of eukaryotic algae, glowing with sunlight, bending and swaying in the currents like forests of kelp to come. There is a coziness in this hidden abundance. Life was quietly greening the oceans long before trees reached into the sky. The seas themselves became gardens, tended not by hands, but by the sun and the slow patience of time. These meadows of cells nourished all who lived among them. They were the world's first pastures, its first farms, its first green expanses. And in their abundance, they transformed the earth. Oxygen levels rose higher, stabilized by their constant breath. Nutrients cycled more efficiently as they lived, died, and were recycled by bacteria. The seas grew richer, more capable of supporting complexity. It was as though the earth itself had discovered gardening, sowing invisible seeds across its oceans and letting them flourish in silence. Think of the forests you know today, tall trees stretching toward the sky, leaves whispering in the wind, animals sheltering in their shade. Now imagine those forests hidden within the oceans of the Proterozoic, smaller than sight, but no less important. The same patterns were there, producers feeding grazers, grazers feeding hunters, waste returning to the cycle. The blueprint of ecosystems we know now was already written in those invisible gardens. Even now, if you gaze into a pond or a tide pool, you see their descendants. The green sheen of algae on a rock, the shimmer of phytoplankton in the sunlit sea, all are living echoes of those ancient forests. They are the oldest gardens of the earth, still thriving, still feeding, still shaping the atmosphere that every creature depends on. In the hidden forests of the Proterozoic, life was no longer rare. It was plentiful, patient, and generous. The seas, once barren, became green cradles of abundance, and in their greenness, they prepared the world for every future forest, every meadow, every garden that would ever bloom. The hidden forests of the Proterozoic seas swayed invisibly in the currents. Algae caught sunlight, protozoa grazed upon them, and hunters pursued the grazers in an endless rhythm of life and death. Already, ecosystems had formed, intricate yet unseen, repeating the same ancient cycle. And yet, within this rhythm, something new was stirring, something faint, like a whisper at the edge of hearing. It was the whisper of multicellularity. For billions of years, life has been solitary. Each cell was complete within itself, carrying the power to feed, grow, and reproduce alone. But in the Proterozoic, this solitude began to soften. Some cells, after dividing, did not drift apart. They clung together, forming tiny clusters, accidents, perhaps, or experiments by time itself. At first, these clusters were fragile, no more than small gatherings held together by sticky proteins or thin filaments. But in those fragile bonds, a new possibility was born. Imagine such a cluster, no bigger than a grain of sand, drifting in a Proterozoic tide pool. The outer cells bask in sunlight, absorbing energy from chloroplasts. The inner cells are shaded, safe from harm. A hunter cell darts toward the cluster, but instead of engulfing it whole, it takes only one or two from the edges, the rest slipping away intact. Survival, it seems, is easier when together. Over time, these clusters grew more stable. Some lasted only moments before drifting apart, while others endured, carried forward generation after generation. The cells within them began to experiment with slight differences. Some grew smaller, some larger. Some took on protective roles at the surface, while others nestled in the middle, feeding quietly. The first faint outlines of specialization were drawn, an artist's sketch of tissues and organs yet to come. It was not yet true multicellularity, not in the way of sponges or plants or animals, but it was a whisper of it, a suggestion, a promise of what might one day be. There is a coziness in this moment, in imagining cells huddled together against the vastness of the sea. Alone, they were tiny, fragile, easily lost. Together, they formed communities, families, beginnings of something greater. The warmth of companionship, even at the cellular level, was shaping the future of life. And this whisper did not fade. Across the oceans, in countless places, time repeated the experiment. Some clusters failed, their bonds too weak. Others thrived, holding long enough for new traits to emerge. Life was patient, testing again and again, until the idea of together became stronger than the instinct of apart. Think of what this meant for the future. From these whispers would come the first multicellular organisms, bodies made of many cells working as one. From those bodies would come forests, reefs, animals, and eventually, you and I. The story of multicellularity is the story of cooperation elevated to its highest form, of individuals joining to become something more. Even today, when you look at your own body, you are seeing the triumph of this whisper. Trillions of cells, each one a descendant of ancient eukaryotes, clinging together, cooperating, specializing, becoming organs, tissues, bones, thoughts. You are, in truth, a multicellular community, a vast city of cells living as one. And it all began here, in the Proterozoic seas, in the gentle clusters of drifting cells. They did not know what they were beginning. They did not know they were planting the seeds of every creature that would follow. They only clung together, quietly, patiently, and in their closeness, the future began to take shape. The whisper of multicellularity was faint, almost imperceptible. But in the silence of deep time, whispers are enough. They become echoes, and echoes become songs, and songs become the symphonies of life. The whisper of multicellularity drifted through the oceans like a faint melody, barely audible, easily overlooked. Yet even as clusters of cells began to cling together and experiment with unity, much of life remained in the shadows. For billions of years, the surface of the earth may have looked barren, but beneath the waves, especially in the dim places where sunlight could not reach, life was achieving quiet victories, gentle triumphs in the dark. Imagine the deep waters of the Proterozoic seas. The sun's rays cannot pierce here, and the world is cloaked in twilight. The pressure is heavy, the silence profound, and yet even here cells live on. They feed not on light, but on chemicals seeping from vents, on the remains drifting down from above, on the faint traces of energy scattered in the water. These are places of scarcity, yet life endures, carving out an existence in shadows. It was in these hidden depths that resilience was tested most fiercely. While the algae above thrived in sunlight, the creatures of the dark survived through patience, through cleverness, through unyielding adaptation. Every success here was small, a mutation that allowed a cell to use a new food source, a partnership that made survival a little easier, a cluster of cells that endured where others fell apart. These were not grand victories, they were not loud, but they were steady, and in their steadiness, they built the foundation of the future. Picture it like this. On the surface of the ocean, the great story of oxygen and sunlight was being written, painting the world with invisible green meadows. But beneath, another story unfolded, a story of persistence, of quiet survival, of unseen innovation. The oceans were not empty, but filled with experiments, countless trials, most of them lost, but some carried forward into eternity. There is a coziness in remembering that life has always been stronger than it appears. Even in darkness, even in scarcity, even when change seemed impossible, gentle triumphs were taking place. The Proterozoic was not an age of sudden bursts, but of whispers, tiny changes, quiet victories, patience stretched across billions of years. And those triumphs mattered. The mitochondria within your cells are the legacy of one such victory. The chloroplasts in every leaf are the legacy of another. The very idea of multicellularity, now whispering through the seas, was born of countless small experiments, most forgotten, but some remembered forever in the code of DNA. Think of the night sky above you, dotted with stars. To us, each star seems small, faint, insignificant. Yet together they light the heavens, so too with these gentle triumphs. Each one alone was a flicker. Together they illuminated the path from simple cells to complex worlds. The oceans of the Proterozoic remind us that greatness is often built not in sudden leaps, but in countless small steps, taken quietly, persistently, in the dark. These triumphs were the heartbeat of life, steady, unseen, unstoppable. And in their persistence, the stage was being set. The seas, once filled only with simplicity, were now alive with quiet innovation. Complexity was gathering momentum, and though it was still fragile, still hidden, it was undeniable. The future was already written in the whispers of the dark. The Proterozoic seas, filled with whispers of cooperation, clusters of cells, and hidden triumphs in the dark, were home to a quiet truth, one that would only become clear billions of years later. The humble Eukaryotes, drifting invisibly in the water, were not just survivors. They were ancestors, the ancestors of everything you now recognize as life. Imagine holding a pebble in your hand. To most, it is just a stone, small and unremarkable. Yet if you trace its story back, you discover mountains, volcanoes, the deep heart of the earth itself. So too with these cells. To see them in their time, they were simple, tiny, almost invisible. But trace their story forward, and you find forests rising, oceans teeming, skies filled with wings, and even the spark of human thought. Every tree outside your window owes its existence to those first eukaryotes. Their chloroplasts, born from ancient cyanobacteria, still catch sunlight, still weaving green life from light and air. Every bird in the sky carries mitochondria in its cells, descendants of the very first partnerships struck in Proterozoic waters. Every animal, every fungus, every plant, every visible form of life is an echo of their patience. Picture a eukaryotic cell drifting in the ocean 2 billion years ago. It has no idea of its legacy. It is concerned only with surviving the currents, dividing when it can, clinging together in small colonies. Yet within it lies the blueprint for whales and oak trees, for mushrooms and butterflies, for the laughter of children and the songs of birds. Its mitochondria hum quietly, unaware that one day their descendants will power the beating of human hearts as they climb mountains or write poems. There is coziness in this thought, that you are not separate from the ancient world, but directly connected. The first eukaryotes are not strangers. They are family, ancestors carried forward in your very cells. When you breathe, when you eat, when you grow, you are continuing a lineage unbroken for billions of years. The Earth itself holds this memory. Fossils of early eukaryotes, preserved in ancient stone, show us their outlines, tiny, round, delicate, and yet so full of meaning. From such small beginnings came every flower that blooms in spring, every coral reef glowing with color, every mammal leaping across a field. Think of how profound that is. All visible life, every creature you have ever seen, every tree, every blade of grass, arose from the quiet persistence of these ancient cells. Their triumph was not in being grand, but in being patient, adaptable, cooperative. They carried within them the keys to complexity, and they passed those keys on, generation after generation, until the door to the visible world finally opened. And so, when you look at the richness of life today, you are looking at the legacy of the Proterozoic. The green canopy of forests, the shimmer of fish in the sea, the wings of birds, the faces of people, all are the visible chapters of a story that began in silence, written by cells too small to see. Life as we know it has many branches, but all those branches trace back to the same root. The first eukaryotes were that root, their quiet partnerships and gentle triumphs, the foundation upon which everything else was built. To reflect on this is to feel a deep sense of belonging. You are not an isolated being, dropped suddenly into existence. You are part of a story billions of years long, part of a family that includes every living thing. And the ancestors who began it all still live within you, whispering in your mitochondria, resting in the green of leaves, echoing in the breath of the earth. The Proterozoic gave us not only the first eukaryotes, but the ancestors of all visible life. And their legacy is not finished. It continues in every moment of growth, in every breath, in every heartbeat, in every step across this living world. The Proterozoic was not a time of noise or spectacle. It was not an age of towering beasts or sprawling forests. It was, instead, an age of patience, an age of foundations, an age of seeds being sown in silence. By its end, those seeds were many. Oxygen filled the skies more than it ever had before, woven into the air by countless generations of cyanobacteria and photosynthetic eukaryotes. Mitochondria glowed steadily within cells, turning that oxygen into energy. Chloroplasts filled the seas with green, catching sunlight and transforming it into nourishment. Colonies of cells clung together, whispering the promise of multicellularity. And across the oceans, the first ecosystems balanced producers, grazers, and hunters in a delicate harmony. The Earth was changing, quietly but irrevocably. Imagine standing at the edge of a Proterozoic shoreline at dusk. The land behind you is bare, no trees, no grasses, only rock and dust. The air carries more oxygen now, though thinner than what you breathe today. Before you stretch the ocean, glisten gold under the fading sun. To your eyes it looks calm, simple, empty. But you know the truth. Within those waters are worlds unseen. Clusters of eukaryotes cling together. Algal blooms drift like hidden meadows. Protozoa hunt and graze in tiny dramas invisible to the surface. Each drop of water carries the seeds of forests, of coral reefs, of creatures that will one day walk and fly. It is a cozy thought that the future can begin in such quiet ways, that tomorrow's wonders are born not from grand displays, but from small, patient steps taken again and again until the world itself shifts. The Proterozoic planted those seeds. For over 1 billion years, they grew slowly, hidden, invisible to the naked eye. But they were steady, and by the time the eon drew to its close, the Earth was ready for complexity, ready for multicellular bodies, ready for an explosion of forms that would one day fill the seas with creatures of every shape and color. We call that next chapter the Cambrian explosion, an age when life's diversity bloomed in ways breathtaking and bold. But none of it could have happened without the seeds sown in the Proterozoic. Without mitochondria and chloroplasts, without nuclei and cooperation, without the first whispers of multicellularity, there could have been no forests, no animals, no humanity. The Earth at the end of the Proterozoic was like a dawn sky, still dark in places, but glowing faintly, promising light to come. Life was holding its breath, its roots firmly planted, its branches waiting to unfurl. And in truth, those seeds are still with us. They live in every breath of oxygen, in every green leaf, in every heartbeat powered by mitochondria. They are reminders that the future begins in patience, that quiet beginnings can grow into wonders, that tomorrow is often seeded in silence. So let us end this journey where it began, in the oceans, calm and vast, carrying possibilities unseen. Beneath their surface, the seeds of tomorrow drifted and clung, waited and endured, until at last the world was ready. The Proterozoic was not a final chapter, but a prelude, a whisper before a song, a seed before a forest, a dawn before the day. And though billions of years have passed, its lessons remain, that life thrives in cooperation, that patience builds strength, that from the smallest sparks, the brightest fires are born. The seeds of tomorrow were sown in silence, and in their blossoming, they gave us the living world. The Proterozoic has carried us far, from the long age of simplicity through the birth of mitochondria and chloroplasts to the first whispers of multicellularity and the hidden forests of the sea. We have wandered through an age of patience. It was not a time of noise or spectacle, but of seeds being sown, of whispers being spoken into the fabric of the earth. Now, as the eon draws to its close, we pause and listen. The oxygen that filled the skies, the cooperation that bound cells together, the ecosystems that began in tiny drops of water, all of these were whispers. Whispers that one day would become songs. Whispers that would bloom into forests and creatures and the astonishing diversity of life to come. There is a coziness in this thought, that the world you know today, the trees outside your window, the birds that wheel through the sky, the warmth of your own breath, was made possible by events so small, so quiet, that they went unnoticed in their time. The first eukaryotes did not know they were shaping the future. They only lived, clung together, endured, and shared. Yet in their simplicity, they carried the seeds of tomorrow. And those seeds grew. The Cambrian explosion lay ahead, waiting to fill the seas with creatures of every shape and size. But it could not have come without the Proterozoic. Without mitochondria, there could be no power for complex bodies. Without chloroplasts, no green abundance to sustain ecosystems. Without nuclei, no safe library for life's code. Without cooperation, there is no possibility of unity. Without patience, no time to weave complexity from simplicity. And so, when you breathe now, when you feel your heart beat, when you look into the green of a forest or the blue of the sky, you are hearing that ancient whisper. You are carrying it within you. The Proterozoic may be far away, lost in the deep past, but it is not gone. It lingers in your cells, in the mitochondria that burn oxygen, in the chloroplasts that catch sunlight, in the DNA tucked safely inside your nuclei. It lingers in every living thing, a memory older than mountains, older than rivers, older than stars in the constellations above. This is the gift of deep time, that the past is never truly lost. It hums within us, steady and soft, like the ocean's tide. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it, the whisper of the first Eukaryotes, the breath of the Proterozoic, carrying forward into every moment of life today. A whisper from the deep past, a promise for tomorrow.